when that's the intent with how we've written up the policy.
The difference is now is that you're switching it to those private entities accessing the public market that they never could before.
That's
and
by
so
far the biggest
all
benefit.
that off-site improvement is now, hey, it's on you to go get that done, and if you can pay for it with just the differential, you'll probably do it. But if you start doing the math on what all those off-site improvements cost, they probably are going to say, well, I'm going to need that, plus I'm going to raise my own taxes too.
Potentially.
And see if you guys will go for that to get it done.
Yeah. And with the differential, I think our hope and plan is that the differential will really be focused on regional things, and they will still have local public infrastructure, right? They're out their portion of the street, their portion of the water lines, et cetera. But the tax differential is going to be focused on, because it's a regional water line, instead of being 8 inches, it's going to be 10 or 12, which costs more, and the differential will pay for that enhancement. The road would be, a 40-foot right-of-way, and now it's a 70-foot right-of-way, and so the differential would pay for that regional, that extra amount. And however we set that up, what we want to make sure is that where we're using the tax differential to do regional things, we want to make sure that we can spend it anywhere inside of that VERC project area. However they want us to do that.
And you don't foresee a circumstance where we're still not doing CRA or CDA. You still do those project areas because you define them of where they're at, and then this could be another tool inside those.
It could be
CRA or CDA.
And I think one reason why you'd look at doing a PID versus a CRA bond is the CRA will always have a connection back to the RDA, right, the city. Whereas a PID is its own, you create this external government entity. And so the bonding, all of that is on their back and not on our name. And so it's like, they're not using our credit, they're not using our name, right? It's their own thing. And so that's another benefit. We don't have the same connection to the bond, nor our residents aren't having to pay for something if they can't make their bond payments. That's between them and the bonding world.
The question of whether the voters and the property owners, it's to create the PID, you need 100% of those. I just verified from the statute. If there are any registered voters and a petition is filed, it must contain the signatures of 100% of registered voters and 100% of surface property owners in the applicable area consenting to the creation of the PID.
So then for the greater PID, it would probably be kind of a Swiss cheese look,
right,
where we'd have a handful of property owners that say, we want this, use my land.
It doesn't have to be contiguous. It could be islands of projects.
Seth, I have a couple of questions about the property taxes with the PID. So in a PID, you get a PID approved, they're getting a bond for their infrastructure, and that bond is backed by them increasing the property taxes within the PID area. Who sets the property tax rate? Is one question. Are there limits as to how high they can set that, which I think we've talked about? And then also, how long is that property tax rate locked in before they could adjust or change that?
Those are really good questions. So in a way, the City Council sets the maximum. In the governing document, like I talked about the parameters of the guardrails of the PID, you can say what their maximum mill levy can be. And then they can go up to that max, but never. And so they decide up to that max how much to impose. The PID, the district itself, imposes the mill levy. Does that make sense? And
Charged in perpetuity. How long?
No, just to retire the finance, to retire the debt.
The bond is
paid. Once the bond is paid, they can adjust that.
It would go away.
It would go away.
It would go away entirely.
So page 4 of this is kind of where you see some of that in the B other criteria, and then paragraphs 1 and 2 outline what kind of the structure of how that would be put together, and they can do 10 mills. And then I think state law allows 15
mills. 15, yes.
And so you're kind of allowing them to do up to 10 mills. And I think our rate is 1. So their rate that they could put on themselves is 10 times what our city rate is, which is huge. But again, remember, chances are each of these PIDs is going to be the land that the developer owns themselves, so they're simply taxing themselves.
Now, with that taxes, that's not replacing, because when you look at your property tax portion of your property taxes, you've got county, you've got city, you've got Nebo.
Still have
it's
all
not
those.
Replacing that, it's just adding to what already exists.
Right.
Correct.
And so they're going to have, again, back to my example, I got those 40 acres and they've got $10 million of infrastructure. That developer's going to have $10 million of expenses one way or the other. And so they're going to go to the bank and get a loan for 15%, I'm making up all these numbers, right? But they can go through this route. This is a tool the legislature has allowed them to use. They're going to tax themselves because they own the 40 acres, and they're going to now go get that money through a bond market. And because of how the analysis that they've done, they can get up to $8 million of the 10. They can't get it all because, that's just, they just can't get it all out of there. But they can get 8 at 7.5%. To them, it's worth it because they can get, they can cut their interest rate in half and spread it over 20 years versus, the lending terms that they might get at the institutions where they would be able to get their lending. So this is a tool that they will want to use as they apply that tax to themselves. And this policy gives you that kind of guidance, you want to be very careful if it's starting to cross over a lot of different boundaries, because you're going to be giving somebody the ability to put a tax on land. And this group, as they looked at the policy, felt very uncomfortable about saying anything about residential, because as soon as you do that, I own 40 acres, but I'm going to subdivide it down to 100 different units. And as soon as I sell off 1, 2, and 100 units, now I am taxing those individual homeowners differently than everywhere else in town. For what? Whatever the reasons might have been. But the committee, as they reviewed that, felt a lot more confident that the business owners, commercial and industrial, would be more understanding and aware of the PID being in place than you and I might be as we go buy our house. We're going to be sitting at the title company and reviewing, and the title person's going to say something about a PID and blah blah blah, and I'm going to be like, just get me into my house. I'm ready to move in tomorrow. And we were really uncomfortable with that concept of how that might impact a homeowner. And so I think that's why this policy focused on other uses than residential, because commercial and industrial is probably more aware. I see you kind of...
Some of us were not as uncomfortable as others. I mean, if you look at the total math on a development, back to your analogy, if you can get a $10 million loan for 15%, there's a cost to that. If you can get an $8 million for 7%, there's a different cost to that. So if you assume all that is passed on to the consumer, which is the homeowner, you could actually save them money by taxing them at 1 mil. You'd have to do the total math, but you could actually save the homeowner money because they had to invest $10 million to even be there. Someone had to invest $10 million to even be there. So I 100% agree. This is not the time.
Or are you saving the developer?
It depends on how you
selling the home.
It depends on how you look at the total finance package, right? If you assume that a development costs $40 million to do, someone's passing that along to the consumer. If you can lower that initial cost by 30, the assumption would be they're only passing $30 million onto the consumer.
The weakness to the discussion always comes back to what will the price of the home be sold for, and if it's sold at market, then everything that you just achieved with that gets lost.
And that is why we didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then I'm not suggesting we do it, but I'm just...
That's a great
clarification. That would be the financial reason for doing it.
If we could ensure that the savings went to the end user, then this is a great possible tool, I think, for residential development. But there's no way we can guarantee that.
It could also be a way to open up a piece of land that we don't burden the
totally undevelopable otherwise.
That we don't burden the rest of the community on.
And although, because I think this policy doesn't speak to it, I don't think that ties your hands forever. It just signals to the world as they come in and look at our policy, if this is what you want, chances are that's not really what the council's looking at. So,
and the very definitely first step into this, let's focus on commercial and industrial and make sure we get it right and understand it fully. I mean, it's several pages long, 9, but so let's get it right. Let's get a few under our belts before we even entertain the thought of somewhere.
I think to what Seth just said too, and this document is a governing document, so like every PID that comes across, we will have to go through and approve, and some will try to push some of these guide rails, and some will, just stay within the bounds of it. And I think that'll be something that we have to weigh every time a PID comes in. And like Shane said, until we get a couple under our belts, there was a lot of things that we weren't necessarily comfortable in taking any type of risk with because of the fact that we don't know what those that come before us are going to bring.
I don't think it should be overlooked the potential economic impact that you could have here. You have some land, especially if we're talking the industrial commercial areas. You have these huge investments that are off-site investments, meaning, hey, here's the 20 acres I own, but then they come, hey, this is what I want to build on this 20 acres, and they get with Jared, and they thought they liked him until he tells them the news that, well, you could pledge all your 20 acres and 20 more acres, and that's still, you probably still couldn't borrow enough money for the off-site power, sewer, and water that has to come through these other properties to get to your property to service your property. And so what do they say? Well, how am I supposed to do that? And Jared says, I don't know, hope that other properties develop, I guess, before you develop, before you want to, right? And so it's the waiting game of how many years, how many 5 years, and how many times does it turn into decades of that not getting done? And the solution is, well, we're not going to, the taxpayer that's here isn't going to go put that in for you and then wait to get reimbursed, even though we do that on some aspect of impact fees. They pay some impact fees when they want to do it. But this says, okay, I can access the public market and go get that $10 million for offsite that my lender would not lend to me and get that in. Now does my project pencil out? It might pencil out if I increase the tax on my own area to pay for it. Is there still profit margin there to do it? And now you've just sped up, economic impact, if you will, to the city as a whole, for jobs, for tax, for activity that otherwise you just have to wait field by field, 20 acres by 20 acres that might happen over 100 years. Who knows?
Yeah, I think, too, we shouldn't be naive to think that even if it's a small PID, that developer that's implementing that PID today is going to be the owner forever.
Sure.
Right? There will be someone paying this bill when it comes due. Yes. And in some cases, it's the developer that did it, and in some cases, it's a future property owner. So the challenges of doing a PID in residential still apply to industrial and commercial. Exact same thing. The goal is to make that project, like you just said, Mike, viable and pencil, and pass that to the consumer, right? Whether it's a industrial consumer or a residential consumer. But the hope is that with an industrial, at this point, industrial and commercial will be more apt to look at it and say, I understand that completely. I know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm willing to continue forward. And unlike 100 different residents coming into a spot. So the challenges are the same.
They're also selling a widget.
They are selling yes, correct.
They have a going business that they can say, this is what I have to sell this widget for in this commercial use. The residential, they're not selling a widget. The widget is one time sold. That's the home. That's what it costs. That's one sale. Might be sold over and over again. But that business can say, all right, well, in this warehouse, we're going to have to sell X amount of widgets with this profit margin.
To overcome that mill. Yep,
that's the difference.
For sure. And there's a reason. There's several reasons why the Benjamin actually looks like the Benjamin X today. One of them is the level of investment needed to develop it is higher. This could help offset that.
Yeah. A lot of ways around all the way around the airport too that come into play for this area.
One more way of one more tool in the toolbox to help implement our plan.
Vaughn, anything else on PIDs?
No, Mayor. Sorry, I came down and sit down to look at that question, and so I don't have anything further to present.
Okay, that's good clarification there, that
Yep.
the 100% of the voters inside that area. would
Voters
decide.
and property owners need to consent to the creation of the PID.
Perfect. Any other questions for Vaughn or Seth, Jared, anybody on that? Okay,
For motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
All right. So having been involved with the review and process moving forward, I would move to approve the resolution approving the PID policy.
And I'd second that.
Motion made by Councilman Marshall, seconded by Councilman Cardon. There's no other questions on the motion. It's a roll call vote. Councilman Cardon?
Yes.
Councilman Took?
Yes.
Councilman Euler?
Yes.
Councilwoman Beck?
Yes.
And Councilman Marshall.
Yes.
Item D is approved for PIDs.
Mayor, maybe just a question for Mr. Anderson. You had a meeting today with a number of developers in the Verk industrial project area. Are any of them ready to submit an application to start a PID review and potential creation process?
We might see a couple by the end of the week.
A couple of PID applications. Yeah. So this is very timely and something they've been watching. In fact, I think we sent this off to a group of developers to get their feedback, knowing that they'd probably be using it fairly quickly to make sure that it was at least understandable and if they had any feedback.
Very good. Tell them to get the application going, get the investment, get the utilities in the ground. Let's get going. Okay, item E, reuse authorization contract, Spanish Fork and Mapleton. The city of, what do we call Mapleton? What's their logo up there? It's not the city of peace, that's Salem. What is it? Don't know?
I can only think of bad things. to
I'll
say.
text Dallas. I'll find out.
The city of stay off my lawn.
It's not that.
No?
Okay.
Mr. Piquel?
Mayor and Council, the water reclamation facility, the new one, will treat effluent to such a high water quality it can be reused and reused in the city's pressurized irrigation system. To do a reuse project, you have to have a reuse authorization agreement. And that's what this agreement is for. And it's also a little bit unique in that, as was discussed earlier, about 20% of the inflow into the plant, the wastewater is Mapleton's. And so this agreement would allow the city to use Mapleton's water because they won't really have a way to pump it back up the hill to use in their city, at least not in the near future. So this will preserve their water from forfeiture in a way. If you collect your water, you treat it, you can reuse it. But if you let it go into the surface waters like Dry Creek and out to the lake, then you're relinquishing your control of the water at that point, and it's then becomes the waters of the state for reappropriation. So we're going to gather our water, reuse it, and we'll also use Mapleton's share to prevent that from forfeiture, if that makes sense. It provides compensation to them for fair market value in the agreement as well. Also, I should point out that the Mapleton can terminate the agreement at any time, or so can Spanish Fork, for that matter. If they want to do a project and somehow reuse their water, they can do that.
Perfect. So secondary water, this is water going on our lawns, going on our ball fields.
No, it will be good water to put on lawns and ball fields,
Yeah.
absolutely. Maybe I misunderstood the way you said that.
Not potable water, not,
No,
we're
we
not
would,
drinking it.
Just
that
Shane's
kind of as a,
But let's not have our kids run through the sprinklers or drink out of the hose. Well, I guess the hose would be
It's not going to hurt you.
Shane's still
I know.
there.
It's
He's all right.
It's amazing to me that this can now go on our grass.
We're going to have a glass of it when it's all done.
No, we're not.
So this is not that yet. This just gives us the ability to do that. So there are a few things that we still need to do in order to reuse the water, but this gives us the rights to reuse our water.
yeah.
So we're not
There's a process of
Not quite
filing with the
reusing
state.
them.
Right.
Okay. You'll let us know when we are, so we can tell.
You'll be
the
very
difference?
aware of that. There's a lot more processes, but the state's doing some changes to water policy, and there was a window of time that ended already that said if you want to ever do this, ask now or forever hold your H2O. And we got in time. Our water at the treatment facility comes, as was said, from Mapleton too, but we don't have rights to use their water. So they asked for their rights and then are giving those to us because it wouldn't be worth it for us to pump it back up to Mapleton,
Right.
Because it already came down here. So that's what this is for. It's just putting all the steps in place so that if we ever want to do it, we can, but we are not doing that today.
And if we want to do it and use Mapleton's share, we can.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Your kids can do whatever they have been doing, but just know that sprinkler water is river water.
Yeah. Yeah, I did know that. Okay,
Drink
thank you.
from the hose bib of your house, but not from the sprinklers popping out of your ground. Mapleton, small town, big heart. That's what it is.
There it is.
Small town, big heart.
I like it. A little better than mine.
We appreciate him. Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Vaughn on the reuse authorization contract between Spanish Fork and Mapleton?
Just a quick one, Vaughn. Just curious, if we were to use this water, reuse the water, how would it affect the amount of water that we've been using for the secondary to water our lawns, for example? Does that really cut down on that amount we use in the future?
I were as smart as Chris Thompson, I would be able to answer that, but I don't know what proportion, to be honest, of our PI water this would represent. I'm not really sure.
Well, it's about 6 million. It's about 6 million gallons a day. So it would be a significant amount of water into the water system. If we're,
It goes through our sewer treatment plant per day.
yeah,
So if you reused it, that'd be quite the
Yeah.
addition
It's a lot.
to your.
So does the state limit how much we can reuse as compared to how much has to flow to Utah Lake?
honestly, I haven't got that much into the details yet because we're so far away from it. This is just us
My understanding
getting a
is
place in
that
the line.
you can treat it and reuse it as long as you don't relinquish control of it.
Yeah.
It's our water rights to use
Interesting.
and
Put it in the
reuse.
ditch.
Million gallons
Until we put it in the
a day is
ditch,
a
and then
lot
it's
of
gonna-
water.
Yeah, then it's gone its way downhill.
That,
So
yeah.
Yeah. So as soon as we put it in the ditch, somebody else has rights to it.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know simply because we're years away from it. But whenever, if ever we get there, this makes it so we can do it. Otherwise, we lost it forever.
Interesting.
right.
Perfect. Thanks. Great question. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for item E.
I move to approve the reuse authorization contract for Spanish Fork Mapleton reuse project.
Motion made by Councilman Took,
Second.
seconded by Councilman Euler. A roll call vote here. Councilman Marshall.
Yes.
Councilman Cardon.
Yes.
Councilman Took.
Yes.
Councilman Euler.
Yes.
And Councilwoman Beck.
Yes.
Item E is approved. I think we got all the A's and B's and agenda items in the council. Anything, or in the agenda, anything we need to revisit before adjourning to closed session? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to go into closed session for strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property and discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual.
Motion made by Councilman Cardon,
Second?
seconded by Councilwoman Beck. A roll call vote here. Councilwoman Beck.
Yes.
Councilman Euler.
Yes.
Councilman Took.
Yes.
Councilman Cardon.
Yes.
And Councilman Marshall.
Yes.
We're adjourned to closed session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.